A Build Hatch developed production.
G'day folks, my name's Aaron Kyle and welcome to Build Hatch. I've been thinking about Build Hatch for a while now. It's basically a behind the scenes podcast which discusses anything and everything to do with architecture, building and construction industries. I wanted to put together a podcast for you guys, the listeners that are out there listening to this right now. Build Hatch it's for the people who are interested in hearing the real stories about the wonderful people, the great products and the fascinating projects in the architectural, building and construction industries. You'll hear more about me shortly. However, I'm a dedicated hard worker. I have a background in construction management, mining engineering and law. And this is a podcast about sitting down with real people and discussing the real issues, both good and bad, and being inspired about all of the different pieces of the puzzle which go into designing or building a construction project. Nothing is off limits with this podcast, and I have this saying that a picture tells 1,000 words, but it doesn't tell the real story, and that's what it's about. I can't think of a better way of starting this podcast than by having my good friend and architect Dyan Try from SDA Architecture sit down and interview me so you get to know who I am. We have some great guests lined up that are coming on to Build Hatch. We also have some amazing partners who want to jump on board and get this podcast out there. You'll hear more about these over the next few episodes. If you would love to be a guest on this show, feel free to either go to our website or reach out to us via our Instagram page. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our first episode of Build Hatch, which is hosted by Dyan Try interviewing me. So let's get into it.
Well, very exciting day, as we've been talking about this moment for a while, and I'm really happy for you. So it's about time that we're finally sitting down to have a bit of a chat about your life and the things that you've been through to get to this point. The concept of Build Hatch, it did start a while ago. I know we were sitting down having a coffee and you sort of said, I've been interested in starting this podcast. And I remember thinking, podcasts, they're the new, it's an everyday thing where you can sit down and you can just be listening and digesting so much information that's so current. And you pitched this idea to me and I was very excited to hear more about it. So having the opportunity to sit down today, I'm very honoured to be a part of this. So thanks for your time and thanks for having me on.
No worries, mate. Thanks for, I'm very honoured that you said yes to coming on here, and we've obviously known each other now for quite a few years. We've worked together, we've been mates, and couldn't think of a better person to be on the first episode and basically, help me start this journey. So thank you.
My pleasure, mate. Very honoured. So obviously, I think our journey started about 5 years ago when I first started working at SDA. I had the privilege of working on one of your first developments that we'd been able to design with you. Not only working professionally, we've also formed a good friendship as well, and I do have a lot of respect for you. I guess there's a lot of stories and things that have happened throughout your career that I guess I've only had a little bit of insight through talking with you about, but obviously on a personal level they have much bigger ramifications and there's a lot more beyond the sort of substance of what we've spoken about. So one of the things I'd really like to know today is the real stories and the real moments that I guess got you to where you are and how you started out and everything in between, because you are a type of guy that's sort of almost living a double life sometimes, someone who's got a lot of mystery and living this family man life, but then you've got this professional empire where you've achieved so much in so many different realms of the industry.
Look, mate, the concept behind Build Hatch is to really get out there and talk to the actual people and hear the real stories behind their project. And it's about hatching those real stories that you wouldn't normally hear or get to know about. And it's not only about the guests' work and their background and what shapes them as a human being, but what actually inspires them. How do they get into their particular area of the construction or design industry? So basically the show will explore how our guests grew up, what motivated them to enter their chosen fields, what did they learn along the way, and what are some lessons that they can share with people listening into the show. And it's about putting the real back into the building industry through the telling of real, authentic stories told entirely in people's own words. And one particular reason, mate, is through the growth of today's social media world, a lot of people only really get to see the glorified images and the photos that show the end product. But to those people that weren't actually involved in the project, no one actually gets to hear the real story. and basically how it all went together and how it was all hatched.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm very excited about that too, because I think the thing for me being an architect, I see one side of it. And, I'm exposed to an aspect, and I have my trials and tribulations working, as part of a big team. And on every project, we're dealing with different types of people in the industry. But what I'm really excited about with the concept of Build Hatch is hearing other perspectives, hearing, the things they go through. Are they dealing with the same stuff we deal with? Are they frustrated by, outside factors that we don't even consider too? So that's where I know you've had a lot of different experiences in being client, developer, builder, engineer, all these other aspects of your life, to be able to sort of wear multiple hats and have, I think, a good, well-rounded opinion of there's stresses in all avenues, and there's all these other factors that always contribute to successes and challenges.
Yeah, that's right. And I hope to help people, and I want to give back. I want to make an impact. I want people who are listening to this podcast, hearing the stories from our guests, hearing the ups, the downs. I want people to be inspired to go out there and, in my experience, I always thought if you ran into a bit of trouble or you had a problem, you needed, you would go to traditionally an accountant or a lawyer. But back when I was building full time, I just wish I had someone to listen to or someone to speak to reach out to, who's lived and breathed it, who's been through it. And I can't think of a better way to do that than to hear other people's stories, because I'm getting satisfaction out of being satisfied to hear other people's stories. That's where I really get my kicks, and I want to help. I want to give back. And that's what this show's about.
Great. So without further ado, I think we should take a bit of a trip back and start where it all began.
Look, I was fortunate enough to grow up between Melbourne and the Hunter Valley. My mum lived in Melbourne and my dad lived in the Hunter on a farm. So I got to witness two very different cities, two different ways of living. Melbourne city life is very vibrant and cultural, and the Hunter Valley has a much more laid back but hard-working feel to it. So out of high school, I was accepted into construction management at the University of Newcastle. And then whilst at uni, after about 6 months, I'd had enough of being just a student. And so I wanted to get out there, and I guess I was hungry to gain that practical experience. So from there, I worked in a number of construction management roles, from estimating, contract administration, project management. And I kept studying on the side and eventually graduated with an honours degree in construction management. And I think it was about 2005, I had an opportunity to get into the mining industry. And so from there, I wanted to further my study in the mining field as well. So I decided I would go back to uni and study part-time. And so I studied engineering and also obtained a few other mining qualifications along the way also. So whilst doing mining, I also had my own building developments going on in the background. I guess you could say that they both complemented each other in my mind, because the biggest issue with being a builder or a property developer is production and cash flow. So I thought, what a great opportunity to have a mining career, which also funded my building and property career also. I guess you could say I always enjoy working hard, but I also enjoy knowing and understanding what goes on behind the scenes, which is a bit like the theme of this podcast, really. It's important to note that I couldn't have achieved everything that I've achieved without the incredible support of my wife and children. So from there, after building for around 12 years, I started to develop a passion for the law and knowing and understanding the practical side of the law, particularly in the construction industry, and just sort of knowing what goes on behind the scenes with that. So then I went on to study combined Juris Doctor and Graduate Diploma of Legal Practice, to now working in the field of construction disputes, which I never ever imagined would have happened. But everything I have experienced, both good and bad along the way, has always been an education and a lesson, and that's how I've always looked at it.
I think at the crux of it too, you just love working by the sounds of it. One of the hardest workers undoubtedly that I've ever met. And, I remember multiple times where you'd catch me off guard and you'd tell me something about your life that would just surprise me. Like, I remember the conversation where you told me you were almost finished a law degree. And I'm like, when did you start a law degree? We've been seeing each other regularly and all of a sudden you're almost finished. Like it's a humbling thing to meet people who are just so driven by their own fuel, where it's not about, I'm going to go do this, and they talk about it forever and then they never achieve it. You're one of those, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to do it. And then just as I'm about to finish, I'll start telling some people. It's like there's that, it's in sight, and it's like you're almost there. That's a remarkable characteristic and something that, is inspiring to lots of people. And I think we all have those own moments in life where we're like thinking about that vision or that goal, and we never quite get there. And, to meet people who are out there on the forefront, just achieving goals that they've set for themselves, it's sort of, it really inspires and puts it into perspective that, the only way you can get there is hard work. That's it at the end of the day. That's what it all comes down to. And in everyone's life, they have outlying factors like family and finances and, cash flow, that being a huge thing to the construction industry. It's undoubtedly one of the biggest complications of our role as architects is, budget, and then for a builder, cash flow. And, but you're someone who's, just dealt with these, not let it stop them from becoming the person you are, and has, looked at everything as a stepping stone. Like, I get to this point so I can get to the next point. I get to the next point so I can get to the one after that, and constantly driven by that motivation that, the sky's the limit. I don't think there's an end point for you. I think you're going to keep being more charged to keep going. There'll be something else after being a construction lawyer. I guarantee it. I don't know what it is yet, but as well as that, you've got, your whole family life, which is amazing, having 2 kids and a wife and having that whole side of things too, to be able to juggle the balance of everything. How, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Is it something that you try and keep very separate, or is there a formula that you have? Because I know, as for me, being in the industry, it's something that has always been, on my mind, and something I work very hard at, but it also has its own challenges. And I know everyone has that. How do you find that healthy balance between succeeding at work in the industry and working your ass off, and then the other balance of how do I still have a social life, a family, all these other goals in life? Because at the end of the day, it's just work.
Yeah, I guess I'm one of those guys who loves multitasking, and I get bored just doing the same thing all the time. But I need to keep active and productive at the same time. So one of the best lessons I ever learned in mining was being productive, not just at work, but in everything that you do outside of work. So it's the good old quote of time is money. However, it's a lot more than that. It's about being productive in everything that you do, even the simplest of tasks. It's important to be productive. And I've always been lucky enough to have my wife and kids involved in work. They've always been a key part of building my life from the ground up, so to speak. So from a young age, they've always been on construction sites. They've been at meetings at times and really taken an interest into sharing my views of working to achieve our goals, which I absolutely love. And for me personally, I always wanted to set a really good example for my kids, and for them to have a strong work ethic. Doesn't matter what they decide to do in life, as long as they have a strong work ethic. That was what was always important to me. And I enjoy working and mentoring others, supporting others, but also believe at the same time credibility is the key to that. So I think you really need to have credibility wherever you wish to work in that particular space. So I've had those tough late nights trying to work out how am I going to solve a problem on site, or trying to finish a project on budget. And I've had those difficult experiences and conflicts with people and clients, chasing money, keeping clients and employees happy as well. So it's extremely tough. It can be lonely and absolutely tiresome at times, particularly when you're working for yourself and you're responsible at the end of the day. So that's where problem solving comes into work, and I think that's the real key to achieving balance. And working as a builder and developer, and now viewing things through the lawyer's perspective, I've experienced both sides of the fence as the client and the builder, and I've seen the highs and lows of the construction industry.
I think having that background from your perspective, to be able to be a part of, seeing good and bad relationships, seeing, good situations on site and bad situations on site, you can't control everything, but I think you having that, as you've gone through each stage, you've made a conscious decision that, if you've moved away from that, then you've learnt from that, then moved into this next realm and sort of taken that as fuel to progress forward again. And I think the obvious thing to become a construction lawyer after, it was quite ironic in a way too, but to come from where you started out to have all these different types of experiences to become a construction lawyer, that's like you're on the other side of a fence all of a sudden.
To relate it back to what we spoke about at the start, it's about talking to, like you do. You could have a project that you designed 3 years ago, or you'll see a project that's just been built. You've been working on that a couple of years ago. So the whole process, there's so many factors involved. As I said, there's some amazing projects out there, and yeah, just to be able to interview and talk to people and hear their story, how do they overcome it? You know, the raw nuts and bolts of it. Even how did you get the job? Like, was there an established relationship with the client? Was there, you know, had you done smaller jobs? How did you manage cash flow? How did you even get the job? There's just so many realms of building, construction and design that relate back to problem solving.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because it's something I think about a lot is, you know, the role of each of our trades in this world we live in now. The role of an architect has changed so much over the years. You know, when I was a kid and I was starting out, 5 years old, I want to be an architect. You know, the kind of prestige that came with that was alluring to me, and that was this role of this power and, you know, to be able to design homes and buildings that change the future. But it's not like that in 2020. It's such a different place. And the same with a builder. You know, there's so much trust that goes into a builder, and clients look at the builder now as this, you know, this entity that is the be all and end all of the success of a project, but without understanding that everything that comes before that couldn't happen without that builder, and then everything that comes after that is also so important. And there's the people under him that work for it, you know, close to nothing sometimes, or don't get the reward out of it. There's so many other factors, but they're so willing to invest all their worth into that builder role. And, you know, ultimately, how do the builders get these jobs? How do the builders, you know, work with these clients? Because the other thing that I've found is, like the situation you talked about, where you see, you know, these signs come up overnight and then all of a sudden they fill the town and then they're gone again, you know, the next day sort of thing. It's been a very fragile industry over the past few years, with the rise of the economy and construction industry booming, particularly around where we're living. But it's throughout Australia. And one thing I've often thought about is, a builder has moved into this position where, do they even have to work to get work anymore? You know, they can put a price on it that they want, and it's sort of like, well, you know, we haven't actually thought about this. Do we really want the job? We'll put some risk on it. And I mean, this is my perspective on it. Whether it's fact or not, that's a different thing. But certainly I see that the days of selling yourself and really marketing who you are and your integrity and worth and everything has now come down to a few photos on Instagram showing, hey, I've built a house before and look how cool our team is, because they all wear, you know, the same uniform and they know how to swing a hammer. Forgive me, that's a little bit architect to say sort of stuff like that, but I've been burnt a few times just to see builders take advantage of clients and not really their role of selling what they're going to do and forming that relationship and bond with the client, because that's so important. And it's something I try and certainly mentor the people I work with. You know, I'll get your foot in the door and I'll give you an opportunity, but from there you need to really take it and sell that, because we live in an environment where we could get 10 prices and every builder would jump at it. They'll put their own margin on it or whatever. But until you actually prove, I'm someone you can trust, this is my process, this is my built quality product, you know, who's going to go with you? There will be a point where the industry slows and it goes back to that day of referrals and recommendations, and, you know, you really having to work for that job. I think relationships, that's you know, the crux of it all. It's important that there's respect on all parts for this, you know, this relationship between, and it is often client, architect, builder. Certainly that's how I see it anyway. This relationship is so critical and so important that there's respect on all levels, and there's an understanding of transparency within that, how important that is. And just coming back to what you were saying about the tender process, I mean, that's something I've seen shift even in my time in the industry, how everything used to be for tender, and we've moved into this realm now where it's like people don't really have time to tender.
That's right.
And the construction industry moves so fast that, you know, it can be a waste to go to tender as well. You can design this whole amazing building, not have any input from anyone throughout the process, get to tender, hey, it's triple the budget because the industry is booming and everyone wants, you know, multi-million dollars for their work. And so what the approach we've sort of started to take is more built on relationships and previous experiences, where you form that trust, and then, you know, you introduce from the outset, let's say concept design stage, we've met a client, we sit in the room, we get a proposal together, they're on board, this is great. You know, before we go too far, we're very quickly reminded we need to make sure how much this costs. Let's get a builder in, or a couple of builders even, ones that we trust and we know and we've, you know, had discussions with about this process that we like to take, where it's about, you know, we'll get you in there early on, we'll get this relationship so we're all on the same page, we know what we're designing, we'll use your expertise of being able to price and understand what's involved with our expertise of being able to design and articulate a brief, and we'll come up with this process that by the end of it, they'll be able to afford the house that we've designed because we've all been talking the whole way through it and there's no surprises. I think that relationship is so critical to the success of the whole industry. And I think as, something we've started to do is create these, sort of groups where we have, guys that we work with, different types of jobs and things like that, and mentoring them on what we'd like to see and then them mentoring us on what they need to see from us. So it's, the industry has changed a lot in a short period of time. And even in my experience, in 10 years maybe, you've seen it go from being very separated. There's builder over there, there's architect over there, and there's client over there, to being all in the one room at the same time and trying to say, well, how do we get this to be the best result for everyone? And I think that's really nice to see.
Yeah, well, certainly. And, pardon the pun, but you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, I know you're a modest guy, but you're also forgetting about, one key ingredient from your side, and that is being a practical architect as well. And I think having that practicality, that experience, so that you are actually designing projects like you do, that you're very conscious early on with how much the client has to spend. So I think that's, obviously a key ingredient, and you're obviously all over it. So
yeah, I think it's something we certainly believe here is trying to value and treat every project like it's our own, and not taking clients' money for granted, whether they have 50,000 or 50 million. It's the biggest investment they'll ever make. And I know for me, we have lots of serious conversations early on, which is, it's hard to have because the architect role it's so alluring to just be like a dream world. I'll just design this amazing house. This client's got this amazing wish list, but you quickly have to ground yourself because there's a duty of care and there's a responsibility that we live in a world where everything costs, every single square meter costs. And you'd be naive and egotistical to think that that's not an important thing to consider from the outset. I can't say to you, hey, Aaron, you want to buy a new car. Well, I've got this amazing Ferrari without even knowing what your budget is. You can't present something to you if it's not even in the ballpark. So I can't design a mansion for someone or this amazing, beautiful dream home if it's not going to be something they can ever reach. So I make their budget, relate to what that dream home is and make it something special on any and every level. It's so hard to do, but it's so important. I don't know whether the industry has suffered because people do sometimes feel a victim in that sense where we've come so far with this and we just have to spend this money now. It's a horrible feeling, but you hear about people being burnt by the industry, clients that are sold this dream and are so invested in it because they've spent all this money on architect's fees and they took 2 years to get it approved. And do they even want the house by that point? Is it a reflection of them? You talk to them about the details in it. And I remember I've got some stories about just speaking with other builders in other parts of Australia that I've formed relationships with and hearing about their trials and tribulations where the architects designed this, home, a duplex, and they're the exact same floor plan. And the build cost on one was 700,000. On the other one next door, it was about 1.7 million. And you ask why? And the client that had the 1.7 million, they had a bigger budget, but they ended up with a house that was so ornamented with these complex privacy screen details and these things that they didn't even understand how to work. And at some point, is that ego? Did the client want that? Did they know they were paying for that? Because if their house next door looks just as good for 700,000, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So it's something that, we need to be conscious of them. And certainly I appreciate your compliment, but it is something that's very serious and it's an important thing for me and the family that I work with. It's so important that we value each other's experience, but also treating our clients' money like it's our own because it's so important.
It's all about having those honest and difficult conversations with the client as well, being in touch with costs from that early stage and incorporating the costs aspects into the design stages. So thinking about those early on, and as normal as that sounds, it doesn't always happen and it really should. And particularly these days, clients are a lot more practical and they can have that early input into the actual costs of the job. And it's about not going on that long journey and over-designing without costs in the forefront of their minds and having those early discussions that we've had. Otherwise, this ultimately then leads to a disappointed client who has gotten to a certain stage of their design or construction and the budget is blown out. And then on the other side, it's about the builder also taking some ownership with the project budget. I've seen plenty of cost plus contracts blow out and with these type of contracts, all parties need to be aware of is the need to be disciplined in costs and communication. So in summary, it's about being economical and conscious of costs and site issues during the early design and tender stages and right through to completion, really.
Yeah, it's like a caveman mentality. It's like you sort of trying to form a language, a common language between you and them, because there's this somewhat expectation in the industry and this opinion that's architects are over here and they're these jerks, and then there's the builder who are the guys that are building it and going, oh, they don't even understand and they don't even know, and it's something so common. I have a lot of mates who work in the industry as trades and whatnot, and we always have this banter amongst us in groups where it's like we'll stir the shit between each other, and we're sitting there and like I'll be prodding them, making these generalizations that are so common to their trade, and they'll be doing the same back to me, and we sort of laugh about it. But it is a harsh reality that there is this stigma. What I think I've certainly been working hard to do is shift that perspective and be out there on the forefront and on site and understanding, and not always trying to push the point, but understanding other people's perspectives I'm working with to become better and learn from the way they work and understand, what's really critical in architecture for me is intent. It's not about me saying I know everything and you need to do it the way I'm telling you. You need to do this waterproofing detail exactly how I say. The reality is you've built that waterproofing detail hundreds of times more than me, probably hundreds of times more than I've even drawn it. So I should be listening to you and talking to you about, well, hey, let's talk about this together. This is at the end of the day how I want it to look. How do we achieve that? I think that's what's critical. The architect is in an advisory role of the design intent. And then the builder, that's the next thing. Well, how do we make it work? They build things, So for me, it's this ingredient of let's remove our ego for a moment. Let's go. The only way we can get the best result is if we all work together. And I think that's really nice. And when you can start to relate to guys, you're on the same level. It's not about a hierarchy of I'm here or you're there or whatever it is. It's about this universal language that the construction industry needs to adopt so that we all survive, so that builders don't go under, they don't underprice a job just to win it. They actually understand what they're pricing and they know this is how I'm going to build it, and we're all better off. And I think from an architect's perspective, we're designing houses we know can get built then too, because we're using your knowledge to say, yeah, that's going to work and we can do it for this much, rather than going, oh yeah, she'll be right. And then you go to price it at tender and you're 50% higher because, actually this is a lot more expensive. Well, hold on a second. Nothing's changed. The design's the same as it was 4 weeks ago.
That's right.
What happens? And I mean, tell us, I'd like to get into a bit more depth about some of your experiences, whether you want to talk about one standout, good, bad, indifferent, but just let's get into the nuts and bolts, because I think that's what everyone wants to hear.
Look, it's important to note that everything that I've been through in the past has directed me to be the person who I am today. As cliche as that sounds, it really is true. I've been faced with plenty of difficult scenarios, both personally and professionally. Now looking back, at the time, I didn't know what to do or how to handle those situations. Business plans didn't go to plan, financial plans didn't go to plan. People forced their way into problems in which I didn't expect them to be involved. I wouldn't have got through those difficult situations if I didn't have a good support network around me, including a very tight family. I also have a few mentors who I don't need to personally mention here, as they'll be listening to this and they know who they are. However, it's about embracing those experiences and working through them, as opposed to shutting down and being stubborn about it. In my experience, you can sometimes attract those experiences. So it's about opening up, working through it by talking to some close people around you and reaching out to your mentors who they're your trusted advisors and they can help you through it. And sometimes the people that can help you are only those that have been through it before, and that's where that credibility comes into it. All of the challenges that I overcame being a builder and a property developer, I couldn't always find solutions within my existing network, and that was a real challenge. But the important thing is I did reach out to the people who could help me and eventually got through it all. Most importantly, I've not looked back since, and I'm actually grateful that I got to go through those experiences and learnt a lot having come out of the other side. Without those experiences that I've had, I wouldn't have gone to law school and had the career that I now have. And again, I know so many people out there who are faced with similar hurdles in the building and construction industry, and both sides of the fence. This is exactly what this podcast is about, telling those real stories.
I think that's really important too. And another thing that you just said there, which I think is nice, is for this podcast to be something that's accessible to everyone, so that it's not just a builder's perspective or, you know, an architect's perspective or a client's perspective. It's something that is quite holistic. So I think it'll be nice to see as the next episodes start to unfold, hear other people's experiences and start to understand their perspective on the industry, because it is so diverse and there's a lot of layering to it that I don't think anyone understands. You have quite a good grip of it given your background in so many different areas, but I think that's really, it's key to the success of this podcast too, because you can see things from other perspective and offer your own insight into it, and over time, you know, have people that can share different stories, good, bad, or indifferent. Again, I think it'd be really nice to hear about people who've, you know, really been burnt, but also the ones that have had great success in the industry and how they've got there. Because I think success is such a hard thing. And everyone measures success on different levels too. And that's the other thing, you know, some people put 50% in and they measure that as success because they get 50% out of it. But then there's others who put 110% in and only still get 50% back. But, you know, they may constantly be at themselves thinking, I still haven't succeeded, and they'll just keep pushing. But on the outside, everyone's like, look at this great successful person. But to them, they still haven't reached that milestone. And I think that's really hard, because if you're not really listening and hearing these stories, you know, again, that picture can just say so much about, look at this successful person, they drive a nice car, they have a house on the beach, whatever, but you just don't know the first thing about the challenges and the trials. And, you know, I guarantee they didn't just wake up one day and they were just in that situation. I mean, there might be one or two people, but that's certainly not the common. I know for me, you know, it's been that constant every day, get up and, you know, one foot in front of another and keep striving to achieve what you need to. You've got to be hard on yourself. You've got to find that balance too, but you can't let yourself fall too far to one side, because if you're not constantly pushing, I don't think you get anywhere. I think it's about trying to be aware and living in the moment and really capitalizing on that, you know, consciousness and paying attention, you know, listening and hearing those things as you see them and hear them, and then aligning and going, hey, this is that opportunity I've been waiting for, you know, really capitalize on that. And I know you are a person that is so on that level, someone who gets up every morning and, you know, running to the point where you can't run anymore, and just constantly pushing yourself, and so driven in that. What fuels you? What is it that you find at the end of the day? Is it your own motivation, or is there someone else that's mentored you, or is it your family that, you know, you just live for this? You know, how do you survive? What is it that thrives, you know, your motivation?
I actually really enjoy resolving problems, and I often use the phrase, I've never had a problem that I can't resolve. And that is certainly true. With the right attitude, most problems can be sorted out, and it just becomes a resources problem. So finding the right resources. I really enjoy this process, and I thrive off seeing people resolve their problems and finding the solution. In addition to that, I also enjoy being satisfied by watching others succeed. And I enjoy mentoring people and helping them get through their problems. Like I said, I was very lucky enough to have a mentor whom I could meet with regularly. We would meet for breakfast, have coffee, and pitch my ideas and problems, and we could sort it out. I'm very passionate about the building and construction industry. I love seeing a building being built from start to finish and driving past and watching these sites go up. And I'm very passionate about high standards, and close enough is not good enough. And that's really important, as there does appear to be instances where there's an existing culture of, I've been taught a certain way of doing things for the last 20 years, and that's the way I've always done it, and that's how I'm always going to do it. And I think it's really important to have the right attitude and embrace change and just considering better ways of doing things.
Another thing I was interested in, which I only found out recently, was that you have some famous Australian television and movie heritage in your family. And I was quite surprised by this, but I'd like to hear a little bit about that, because it just adds to your whole story and dynamic.
You've certainly done your research there, mate. Well, you are right. And without riding on his coattails, anyone aged 25 and above may have grown up watching my grandfather, Paul Cronin, play the lead role of Dave Sullivan on the Australian TV show, The Sullivans. And he was actually part of the inspiration behind this podcast in a way, because when he died last year as you do when a close family member dies, I reflected on my childhood growing up and his personal life. And it wasn't until he died and someone spoke at his funeral saying how much my grandfather squeezed out of his life. I mean, he was a father, husband, actor, property developer, farmer, truck driver, businessman. He did voiceovers. He established and became president of the first Brisbane AFL football club, and the list goes on. He was an extremely hard worker, and I have memories of working on his property renovations as a kid. And he actually owned Australia's largest hardware store in Melbourne, which was Mitre 10 at the time. And remember, this was 20 years, maybe even longer, before Bunnings even existed. And he was very much ahead of his time, and he would take me along to auctions. He was a great Australian icon and connected really well with everyday people. And I remember people always related him to the hard-working Australian, and that showed because he went on to win 5 Logies in his career. And I remember he used to always talk to me about what goes on behind the scenes and that preparation is the key to any good performance of work. He used to always say that it is always the work that goes on and preparing for the main event and the people behind the scenes making it all work for the main shot, and that people only ever see the finished product, but it's the work that goes on leading up until that particular point. As I said, people could relate to him really well, and he worked extremely hard in everything that he did. And it wasn't until I heard someone saying at his funeral, like I said before, that he squeezed so much out of his long life that I thought, well, that's what life's about. It's about being inspired and having a go and learning from your mistakes, learning to take the hits and getting back up, and just putting all that work into preparation to make that final shot such a worthwhile result. I find it interesting that you learnt that in your research, mate.
Thanks for sharing that with us too, mate. That's obviously very special, and it's nice to be able to see someone go from obviously being on a construction site to being this great, successful Australian icon. Like, that's a feat in itself, I think, and it shows again about that hard work and that determination, because it's not every day you hear a story like that. You've achieved so much, and you're such a humble person too, and that's where a lot of people that are listening may not know, but you've built some amazing homes, which I've certainly been lucky enough to be a part of working on that with you. You're going to build some more amazing homes and some incredible ones to start soon, which is exciting as well.
I guess you're right. I have been working extremely hard, but this is now my opportunity to speak to people about what they've been through and what hurdles they have overcome to succeed. And it would be great for others to hear these stories and possibly relate to them. It's important to build a community of people who can help each other and learn from other people's experiences and mistakes. And generally, I just want to make an impact on people's lives. We have some really exciting guests lined up. We have some great people that are jumping on board to help us deliver the message and get out there. We equally have some great people that want to come on the show and allow others to hear their stories as well. And everyone I speak to shares the same theme, and that you just can't grasp the full story behind the pictures, or even driving past a particular project, you don't really understand the process and the challenges, what worked, what didn't work, and they are the real stories that people definitely want to hear.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's a story. So I'm certainly privileged to be a part of the first episode, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming from here on.
Look, thanks, mate, and I really appreciate you coming onto the show. I know we've been discussing this concept for a while now, and we've thrown some ideas off each other. So, yeah, thanks for giving up your time. And for people listening to this who want to get into contact with yourself, what's the best way of going about it?
The best way is probably to look up our website. So our business is called SDA, Space Design Architecture. If you go on to www.sdarch.com.au, you'll be able to find everything there. And feel free to reach out if we can help you in any way.
Oh, that's great, mate. Well, that's it. It's been it's amazing. The time's gone very quickly. So, thanks for being part of it.
Pleasure as always, mate. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Cheers.
Well, that was Build Hatch's first episode. So you got to learn a little about me and the motivation behind bringing you this podcast. Like all great podcasts, we want to spread the word, so please do support us by not only spreading the word, but by also rating this podcast. It means the world to not only myself, but to all of those hardworking building and design people out there who are doing it tough, listening to this, and are looking for some real inspiration. As mentioned earlier, if you would like to be a guest on the show, or you have a special project that you want to share about or share some insights into your career, please do get into contact with us by either our website or reaching out via Instagram. Thanks for listening and supporting Build Hatch, and don't forget to rate our show. Thank you.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.